Jamaicans exercise their right to access the information to public and government information? Well, joining us this morning to share insight on how this is done is Jamaicans for Justice Policy and Advocacy Specialist, Jade Williams. Morning, Jade. Welcome to Smile Jamaica.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. So first of all, when we say access to information, exactly what is the scope of access that we're talking about?
Okay, so we have a right to seek, receive, disseminate, and one other thing, information, ideas. And as a part of that right, we would have implemented in 2002 our Access to Information Act. Mm-hmm. And that act would allow for us to access that public information, which we should have access to, as that is what our tax dollars go towards supporting. So the Access to Information Act would allow us to take up that right to seek, receive, and disseminate information fulsomely.
And Jade, what are some of the reasons that people would need to access information such as that?
Well, if you want to know what your government is up to, say, for example, you are a beneficiary in the PATH program, and you want to get a better understanding of the parameters in which a person can be selected for the program, and so on. You can request that information from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. Say you are doing research at school and you want to get an understanding, for example, of how many persons would have benefited from social interventions under the zones of special operations. That's something that you could get through access to information requests from the Social Development Commission. So it is there for us to get that information to understand what our state is doing, but also to hold the state accountable in instances where promises have been made, but we've seen no outward trajectory towards it.
Clearly, there's going to be some information that the government will say, it doesn't serve public good for something like this to be accessed. What are those instances? What types of government information are exempt from disclosure?
Well, there are several. There is, of course, issues that have to do with security and international relations. So anything that would prejudice military operations, police operations, or would overall affect our national security interests would not be information that could be shared. But also there is information that's subject to legal professional privilege. So if you had said it in confidence to your lawyer, that also couldn't be shared. And things that have to do with your private business that does not touch public funds would also not be information to be shared. There are several other things under the Act, but those are the most pressing, I would say.
Okay.
So I'm a citizen and I did get up and I say, you know what? I want to know how so-and-so and so. But what is the process?
Okay, so there is an application process under the Access to Information Act. One of the challenges that people have is finding out where to go to ask the question. So you might know exactly what you want, but you don't know which public body is supposed to give you that information. So you can access the Access to Information Unit to get a better idea of that, but generally, a public body, even if you send your application to the wrong one, should transfer it to the correct public body so that you'll still get the information, even if you weren't sure of where to request it. But essentially, the request process is fairly simple. You can send a form or a letter. You can make a phone call. You can send an email, so electronic, phone, any means. You can go into an office and request the information from their Access to Information officer. Every public body should have a person designated to take those requests. And once you make the request, they have 30 days to respond to that request. And where it is that they are unable to respond to that request in that time, they can ask for an extension of a further 30 days to respond to the request.
I've heard stories of folks complaining bitterly about this ATI request and the process and the time it's taking for information to be provided. How has that process been going, Jade, in the main?
Well, in JFJ's experience, we've had some mixed results. Some agencies are extremely responsive. For example, Social Development Commission, extremely responsive with comprehensive responses to the questions that we've asked, but we've struggled with other agencies, for example, the Jamaica Constabulary Force or the Ministry of National Security. And we've seen where others have made requests that have been denied on the basis of the Data Protection Act. So that's another challenge that is new, since the Data Protection Act is new, that we have been encountering. One of the issues that is coming up a lot more recently is the issue of appeals. So where it is that you ask for information from a public body and the public body is of the opinion that you should not access that information, they can deny your request. But as a citizen, you have the right to appeal that decision that was made by the public body once an internal review has been done. Unfortunately, what came to light in this last quarter of the year here is that we have not had an appeals body constituted, the tribunal constituted since about February or March of this year. So it is a challenge for those persons who have appeals pending and wanting to know the decision on their access to information. So yes, there is some challenges and there is a need for legislation to be reviewed so that it can be in line with new obligations in the Data Protection Act while still maintaining our right to access information in the Constitution.
Yeah, just to be clear, when we say public bodies, we're not just referring to ministries, we're referring to ministries and the agencies that are a part of all of the government ministries, right?
Absolutely, and we're also referring to private companies where the state has a 50% share or more in that body. We can also request information from them.
Okay.
And sometimes in the difficulty of providing what might be the fulsome information, there is also the option of, or not option, I guess it's important, of redacting information and giving it, right?
Yes, for sure. But we've also seen, and it is allowed under the legislation if the information is one of those exempted pieces of information. But what we found is that there are occasions where the redacting is so extensive that the document that was provided is essentially useless. So we would still need to put ourselves through that internal review or appeals process to
But
get.
Jade, how do you work through that? Because sometimes if the information is redacted, does that mean it's too sensitive? It has national security implications, it has whatever other implications, and so it can't be released as it is, but redacting a little bit wouldn't help either. You have to redact a lot.
I mean, that can be the case. And I think where it is that both the agency and the person requested it agree that that is the case, then there is no challenge. But I think that where there is a disconnect as to whether or not that privacy is necessary is where the challenge comes in. And we find that persons tend to ask for a review of those responses to ensure that it is actually necessary for it to be redacted in such an extensive way.
All right, Jane.
Good information.
Yeah.
Good information. So if folks want access, again, they do what, Jay? Just walk us through the process quickly again.
So you can just send a letter or a form. The form is posted on the Ministry of Justice's website. This is also hosted on the Access to Information website. They have their own website. So you can fill out that form and submit it via email. You can submit it in person, or you can call the agency that you are requesting the information from, and they are required under the legislation to still take your request, even if it was not in writing.
Excellent.
Once you do that, they have 30 days to respond.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Jade.
Yeah. Good information. Jade Williams, Jamaicans for Justice Policy and Advocacy Specialist. What's next, Harris?
We hear all about the Junior Achievement Jamaica, empowering young entrepreneurs.